Thanks for watching the Beans and Dice Pod. You're listening to the Beans and Dice Podcast, a podcast about how we game.
Hey, folks, welcome to the Beans and Dice Podcast. It is not Thursday night. Don't look at your clocks. Don't reset your screens. This is not some weird Groundhog's Day thing. It is actually Friday night, and we have a call-in show for tonight, but it's a special call-in show tonight. I'm Carlos.
I'm Wayne.
And with us today, our special guest for the special topic tonight on this Friday night edition of the call-in show is my man from Talks Tabletop, Ron Frazier. Say hi to the folks at home, Ron.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you.
Well, Ron, thank you for joining us tonight on this special edition of the show where we're going to talk about RPGs, a.k.a. role-playing games.
I think that's why I went with the tankard tonight.
I brought the wooden mug.
No
pressure, Ron. No pressure.
I have the +1 gaming coffee mug.
Oh, I like it. That's cool. I like
winner.
That one. There you go. Winner.
Winner. And tonight, the goal of tonight's conversation is just to introduce to you all a little bit about us and give you some of the street cred of where we came and grew up with on the RPG world, because each of us have been RPG gamers in this life and the past. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the state of the RPG world at the moment. So almost like a state of the union of how we see, and I'm going to defer a lot to Ron and Wayne. They play a lot more RPGs than I do. The state of the RPG world at this moment. And then finally, we'll end off with some tips for y'all at home. And if you're new, because we are primarily a board game show, if you're new to the idea of RPGs, you think you might want to try it, maybe that's why you're tuning in, we're going to give you some tips on what to do and how to get into an RPG group, game, session, etc. So stick around for the hour and then we'll also have the phone lines open. That's the cool part. We'll open the phone lines for y'all to pop in and ask questions and interrupt us. So that'll be interesting to see if we can keep our thoughts in check and our trains of thoughts going as we get interrupted with questions. But that is definitely the hope, is to get interrupted with questions from you beautiful folks at home. So we'll start it off with Ron. Are you now, or have you ever been, an RPG gamer?
I have been, and I am. As a matter of fact, tonight is normally my game night, but I put that off so that I can be on the call-in show with you guys tonight. I've been playing since 1987 when a Navy brat named Calvin had a red box D&D basic set in his bag, and I saw the cover, and the curiosity got the best of me, and I asked him what it was, and he told me Dungeons and Dragons. So I asked him what was that, and I have been gaming ever since, playing a variety of games. Dungeons and Dragons, of course, although we'll talk about that a little bit later, and a bunch of other games.
Wayne, how did you get into the RPG world? What's your story?
I have my brother is 7 years older than me, and so he was 15-ish in 1986, 7, same as Ron, probably right around the same time. So I would have been 8 or 9, and him and his buddies would play D&D in his room a bunch. The kids in the neighborhood, and I always wanted to play. Right, I wanted to play. I kept bugging him. My brother never would play, and I remember one of his buddies said, "You know what? I got you. I'll come early one day and get one of your friends or a couple of friends from your neighborhood, and I'll run you guys through an adventure." And so he was 15, 16, and I got like 2 or 3 of my friends, and we were all 9, 10, and we sat at our kitchen table and we played D&D for about an hour, and all of our NPCs, all of our player characters were killed within the first hour. Death by goblin. Yeah, so it was the first kids, but that from that point on, I was a gamer. I was into RPGs and stuff. So so that was it. It was cool. One of my brother's friends took pity on us and said, "I'll run you guys through a game." So it was kind of cool.
It took a brother's friend.
Yeah, my brother wasn't going to do it for me. He's a jerk. Not really. He's a good guy, but he wasn't the GM. The GM was like, "I'll show up early. I'll run you guys through." So it was kind of cool. And we'll circle back to that later, probably, because the whole idea of how you get people into the game. So
That's pretty cool that you had gaming in the family. I did not. I did not have RPGing in the family. I'm kind of like Ron. It's not something I grew up around. I had no idea what it was. I was actually around, I think, 12-ish when my uncle, my aunt's husband, so he's not my blood uncle, but he's married into the family, brown like me. So he and I were the only brown ones in our family. And if you don't know about Puerto Ricans, we come in all different stripes and colors, and I was the brown one in my family. So we connected. Him and I connected. And he was Army, and I guess when he was stationed in I think Germany in the Army, they played a lot of D&D. You know, there's not much else to do, so they played a lot of D&D. So he got the itch, and he bought himself all the books for 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I think Advanced and Dragons 2nd edition. Sound about right?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
AD&D. Yeah.
AD&D. Yep.
Yeah.
So he ran me and my brother, my older brother, through an adventure at his home. And I fell in love. My brother hated it. My older brother, Waldy, did not get into it. I fell in love with it. I think my uncle found that it was a bit daunting to run the game instead of play the game. So he kind of weaned off of it and running those adventures, but he gave me all the books. So I took those books home with me. And in 7th grade at Young Middle 7th grade center here in Tampa, Florida, we used to have 7th grade centers instead of 7th grade in middle school. It was just separate 7th grade, and it was Timmy O'Toole. Tim O'Toole was a kid I met
made that
there.
up. That's an NPC name. Come on.
Listen, and it was a very ethnic neighborhood I grew up in. You know, it's a very black Latino neighborhood. He's like one of the few white kids that were there, and he, you know, saw me with my book. He was into it. Next thing I know, he's walking me through how to do it better, and I haven't seen the guy since. But man, he got me hooked in to the point where 8th grade and 9th grade in middle school. Because we had 8th and 9th grade together. Weird. Tampa's weird. And then I didn't dress out one day. Didn't dress out a single day for PE. When you don't dress out for PE in middle school, they literally post you up against one of the fence posts. Is what you do. You got to sit at one of the fence posts. Because the other kids play D&D. So we would yell at each other from fence post to fence post with our D&D books out and our dice, throwing dice on the ground, trying to run adventures while sitting in the hot Florida sun. Up against a fence post. That's how I got introduced into D&D. But then as I became a manager of a roller rink, I met some of the other managers were longtime gamers, and we would host people over at the roller rink. We would shut down for the evening on Friday or Saturday night, and we'd have the pizza ovens going all night long, and we'd have 10, 15 of us running all kinds of, Legends of the Five Rings. We'd run some sci-fi RPGs. We'd run D&D, and we'd have pizza till sunrise. Just being there, just having a roller rink all to ourselves to play games in. So that's kind of my story of the RPG world, of how I get into it.
Nice.
Let's bring it into the modern times. So more recently, go ahead, Ron.
That's what I was just saying. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now,
More recently, what are y'all playing?
Well, I remember more comment to that because I think what you talked about is like you already hit on. I think what an interesting fact, like you had your uncle, right, who was in the Army and was overseas, and he played D&D, and the most Irish possible NPC name ever, right, who introduced D&D, right? But I've had similar experiences, like throughout my life, I've gone through spells where I couldn't find gamers, right, or people who played RPGs, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, I'm surrounded by people who play games. I remember because played when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever, and then by the time I went to a high school, kept big Catholic high school in New York, and couldn't find people who played RPGs or games, right? So, but like I would randomly, like, I remember one day, it was like my sophomore, junior year in high school, I had a D20 in my hand just because I kept it in my backpack and I was just kind of playing with it. And I played football, I was a big athlete, and doing something like that, yeah. And I was just randomly, like, after practice, just kind of funneling into my thing. My D20 found out and bounced on the floor, and the guy was like, "Oh, hey, you got a D20? You play D&D?" I'm like, "Yeah." Other jock dude from the football team we'd never imagined in a million years was a gamer, hardcore D&D player. So we would play at lunch hour. We don't, right, whatever, Played go to college. I go to college. I'm at college in Connecticut. Not a lot of gamers, or I thought not a lot of gamers. I had joined a fraternity, ended up moving into an apartment with 3 or 4 fraternity brothers. And the fraternity I was in college school was a multicultural fraternity. It was, no matter of a person's color, he's always your brother and whatever. So I moved in with two Dominican kids from the Bronx and a Puerto Rican guy from Brooklyn and me from Long Island, right? So the 4 of us. And it had just so happened all 4 of us were role-play gamers. Didn't know beforehand. I'm like unpacking my stuff in my room, and they're like, "Oh my god, you play D&D? I play D&D. I play this. I play that." It was like, okay, great. So 3 years later, we roomed together for 3 years. And so like at period times in my life, I've found people who were role play gamers by happenstance, and they were just every make, model, male, female. Met my wife. She plays games that I never knew, and been gaming with my wife for 15 plus years now. So it's like I just think
That's great.
there are more people who are into role playing games than you think, and you'll always find someone randomly if you just reach out. But anyway, so
If you just kind of
That's cool.
like caltraps, just kind of throw D&Ds
Yeah,
out on the ground.
I had kind of a similar story, but kind of different. In middle school and high school, I had a couple of false starts. Couldn't really get around too much, and so I didn't get a chance to actually like really play with the group. But I sure did spend a lot of time making characters and drawing up
Sketching out
myself.
dungeons on graph paper.
You're right. And it wasn't until I got into college where, while my roommate wasn't a D&D player, my marching band friends were, like, at least one of them was, and then the other one wasn't a gamer, but we introduced them to D&D, and so we had a little group in our freshman hall, and we pretty much stayed together for several years, and then like I for various reasons I took a couple of year break, and then started gaming with some guys in my church at that point, and I've just been gaming with a variety of people ever since. I've introduced quite a few people to the hobby over the years, and played D&D, but also played Star Wars, other sci-fi games, just games of different genres, and there's a whole wide world of genres of fiction and storytelling in the hobby. And I think one of the things that I think gets really glossed over is that since like D&D is the big brand, that people think that the role-playing hobby is D&D. A whole lot of people think that, and it just simply isn't true. So I would say many people get their introduction into the hobby in D&D, and I don't even think that's the best way to do it, but we'll talk about that later. But I mean, that's just the truth, because it was the first game out there, and so it has the history, it has the brand recognition, and so that's what people know.
Yeah. Well, let's fast forward, and then we'll fill in the gaps. So we talked about our early introduction to RPGs. Let's fast forward to today, modern times. What are you playing right now that you're in love with? So, like, what's the hotness for you? Wayne, take it.
For me right now, it's actually we're messing around with and playing the Avatar role-playing game.
The Blue People Avatar?
No, like Avatar, the Last Airbender. Hold on. Okay.
Secret Tunnel Avatar? Secret Tunnel.
Avatar.
That Avatar. Okay.
Oh.
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
And so that's a role-playing game.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yes.
We did a Kickstarter. It just got delivered maybe a couple months back. And because what it is right now is, unfortunately, in the last, the pandemic, and then just people moving in the last few years, a lot of our game group, our D&D, and well, not D&D, but our role playing group, because we didn't really play much D&D the last 4 or 5 years. They moved out. Some people moved to Seattle, some people moved to LA, people moved to New York, things like that. So right now we're sort of in a rut of not having a local group where we meet on a regular basis. So we're my wife and I are starting to look into introducing our son to role playing and playing a game. And I think my wife is going to run GM an Avatar game where my son and I will play the characters. Nice. We're going to do a father and son team of benders that are, traveling the world, walking the earth, as it were.
That sounds cool.
Yeah,
that sounds really cool.
We're excited.
Where do you find adventures for a game like that, right? Like, I can go to Armada and I could scoop up 8 different books that have campaign settings and adventures for D&D, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're playing something as niche as Avatar, the animated series?
Well, I think the good thing is that the RPG itself gives you 4 or 5 eras you can play in and gives you some ideas right? I don't know necessarily what my wife's going to do, but I have the benefit of having a wife who's a theater person and an artistic person. So she's very creative and she'll probably just come up with her own story. But me personally, honestly, what I do is on the shelves here, I have bookshelves here. I've got 3 or 4 bookshelves here. I'll take a D&D module or I'll thumb through D&D modules and find things that I might be able to borrow and steal from and use in a different setting. Right. I think I've played enough different RPGs over the years from different settings where I just sort of know how to adapt, or I've sort of learned how to adapt things from different settings. And so I'll run certain game, like I have a dungeon module from D&D that I've run probably 10 times over the last 30 years, but I've run it in like 6 different systems, right? I'll just morph it and use it for different systems.
The trope of the adventure that
you just need those adventure ideas, and Google is your friend.
Yep.
I Google stuff all the time, but yeah,
that's a trick.
Yeah, so we're looking at that. We're looking at that, and then actually, I right before the show, I mentioned I'm starting to write again for Star Wars with the Mandalorian, and all the shows have just piqued my interest because we used to play a lot of Star Wars RPG in the day. And so
which system are you thinking about using for?
I'll
Star
probably
Wars?
still use the old D&D, the D20 Star Wars system,
the WotC one.
Yeah.
You got the first edition, the revised, or the saga edition?
I got revised and saga. I'll probably use revised because I have all those books in PDF. And what I was thinking about doing is actually just asking some of my friends who have moved away is, hey, do you want to do a Zoom game? And let's play by Zoom, and I'll run a adventure via Zoom. So I'll probably use so. But there's so much. What's funny is, I swear to God, like half of the plot of the Mandalorian and Ahsoka and Bad Batch and the stuff that's come out in the last few years, I'm like, dude, we've played that before.
Right?
In
it feels like
a game 10 years ago.
It feels like they literally played an adventure and then just kind of took notes and then turned it into a TV show.
Because I remember the Star Wars game we were playing like 10 years ago. We had a whole arc where we were like Force sensitive characters, and we went to Camino and destroyed the cloning facilities and the Empire. Like it was like I'm like, man, we played those things like 10 years ago. Now it's
and then you
TV.
got the random encounters. Like there's some random giant alligator thing that just starts eating people for no reason. So you got to fight it off. Kind of a random experience point generator.
Yeah. So that's what I'm playing right now. I definitely want to get back into doing more in-person stuff, but yeah, it's tough. Ron, what about you? What are you playing?
Well, I am the most time GM, so I run pretty much what I'm interested in playing. So there's a benefit in that, and I actually love being a game master. Right now, I'm actually speaking of Zoom. Although I'm using Google Meet, there are 2 friends of mine that I'm playing with on Friday nights, and we are rotating from 3 different campaigns. The first one is a sword and sorcery campaign that actually started with D&D 5th edition that I hacked, and then I decided that was a terrible idea. And so I went back to an old school version of D&D called Basic D&D, 1981 Basic Expert. And when we go back to that, I'll be running that with a game called Shadow Dark, which is phenomenal. Then it's also a blend of what we call BX D&D and with some fifth edition sensibilities. So my second game is I run a superhero game using the Icons Assembled edition.
Okay. And
so Icons Assembled edition is kind of it's a love letter to Marvel superheroes. It's a blend of the classic Marvel superheroes game and Fate. So there's a storytelling element to that. I've actually been running that campaign on and off for like 12 years. So one of the guys was one of my original players. The other guy is new to that campaign. And then that's the cover. Yep, that's it. Fantastic game.
Nice.
Now the third game, I'm actually running a Star Wars game. But I'm running it with a streamlined version of the classic D6 system,
Okay.
That,
The fastest.
oh, actually, it's called Hyperspace D6.
Okay.
A game designer took the classic D6 system and streamlined it, and that's what we're playing right now. So that's the current campaign, and I'm rotating between those 3 campaigns via Zoom. So I only have 2 players, but like it's fantastic. We've been having an absolute blast, and I can't wait to continue.
You don't need that's why I think getting into role playing, right? This later topic, but you don't need 3, 4, 5 people, right? My wife and I have done 2-player where she's a GM and I'm a player. Yeah, we've done what's the not Fringe? What's the TV show? The TV show with Timothy Hutton where they're like it's like the modern A-Team, and they're like helping the downtrodden against the big bad guys. Oh, Leverage. You know, you ever watch the TV show Leverage? There's an RPG on that, and so we've run like one shots where I'm one of the guys from Leverage, and she's the GM. So you really only need 2 people, and there's even some solo RPGs out there like
Ironsworn.
Yep.
Yeah. So I have Ironsworn on my shelf, and I also have Ironsworn Starforge, which is a sci-fi version of it. You don't need people to play role playing games. Of course, it's great to have people playing role playing games.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot better with a group. But
I've been thinking about running a solo RPG with my son because, like Wayne, I want to get my son into it, but I want to freshen up my GMing skills before I put him in front of a group of people. And so I've been reading through one of the starter packs. I think the Essential. Might be the Essential, might be the starter. I got a bunch of these D&D starter systems because they're like $15. They come with dice. They come with characters pre-generated. They come with an adventure and the basic rules of 5e all built into it, right?
Yeah.
And in the rule set, it provides what they call sidekicks. So they're these NPC type. Okay, the Essentials. So sidekicks, like a type of helper that the solo player could use to do things with them. So it gives them more characters to play with, but they're not fleshed out. They're not going to be role playing as much. They're just kind of like maybe your spellcaster or your brute that's going to be there to be your muscle, while the player gets to play out their character with their sidekick. And if their sidekick dies, they have to go to town and find a new sidekick. But they got them on cards, so just hand them a card. Here's your new sidekick.
Yeah.
Like that. And you've also been like, I love to hear, like, I know you've mentioned a few times, you're taking your son to Adventures League.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that back when we go to
How to get people
back in.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Gotcha.
So
right, that's cool.
My modern playing has not been. Like the last time that I really RPG'd was 4th edition, which was what, 5 years ago? No,
longer than that.
More.
No, sir. 11.
Now. Yeah.
11 years ago now.
Yeah, 10, 11, yeah.
Wow. I've had kids since then, multiple plural. But I used to run one-shots, adventure nights at Anthem Games off of Ehrlich.
Yeah, yep.
Over Ehrlich in like Henderson, I think it is, or Anderson. I can't remember anymore. Hutchinson, out there. And I would run one-shot adventures could have been every Tuesday night, I think it was. And, I'd come in, the game shop owner, James, real nice guy, would have a kit for me, and Wizard of the Coast would send him a kit in a folder, and it had tiles for the whole adventure. Yeah. So it had all the tiles laid out, and then it had all the NPCs, the bad guys, and the quick storyline. So I just spent 15, 20 minutes kind of reading through the synopsis of it, and then folks would come in, and I'd run the adventure. But then I get to go home with tiles and NPCs and all kinds of goodies that I got to take home with me from that night. Nice. So that was probably the most recent system that I've been playing in.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I loved 4th edition. It was like a war game.
See, 4th edition is what's funny. That's my least favorite of all the D&D editions.
That was my favorite because it felt like a tactical skirmish war game.
Yeah, I don't want to get on a tangent, but I'm going to go ahead and get on a tangent.
It's not a tangent when it's your show.
Yeah, it's you, man.
So 4th edition was actually a fantastic game. The problem was they were trying to market it to kids that played WoW.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it was,
and even though they wouldn't admit it, like they went as far as their marketing was terrible. Like for legacy players like Wayne and I, the marketing was a complete and total turnoff. They were trying to look cool. Like, look at this, we're killing all our sacred cows and blah blah blah, and it was just bad. And I think that's what put a sour taste in people's mouths. But the game was actually pretty good. But the thing is that you need to bring your old players along for your initial success to in order to to prop the game up. And that's where fourth edition failed, because they didn't give us legacy players enough of something.
Yeah.
But with fifth edition, they said, okay, let's bring some of that stuff in. Yeah, and it's been the most, and honestly, through a bit of luck, it's been the most successful edition.
And I think what also is you have this huge swath of gamers like Ron and I and Carlos, right? These OG D&D players, right? And so we grew up playing D&D, and then D&D was popular, and it started to wane at a certain point, right? Not my name, but just Wayne as but then you had my wife, and she's only 4 years younger than me, but that slightly different generation, and they were playing Werewolf and Exalted and Vampire and that stuff, right? And I feel like D&D thought okay, well, we got to capture this new young generation of gamers. And they also missed them though, because you had the old school D&D players, and you had all this next generation of White Wolf and all these kind of gamers, and none of them liked 4.0. They went for the WoW gamers, which was just generic people who fell in love with WoW and EverQuest and stuff. But yeah, fourth edition,
they kind of accidentally picked up the war gamer.
Yeah,
right. Because it really was
a niche market, though.
So it is. They're all dying. I mean, you know how many cons I've gone to where I'm the youngest guy there. Period. Everything is. It looks like a Baptist church. It's just white hair everywhere. Just blue and white hair.
Blue.
But it was a war game, and my buddy Mike and I, my buddy Alex, my buddy John Votter, we got together weekly for our adventure. We couldn't wait to get out there for our, and it was a min-max, just let's go, beat him up, kind of okay, you flank him, you get that bonus for it's very tactical.
Yeah, and I think that's where you lose some. So gamers, RPGers, there's not two camps. I mean, there's a spectrum, right? But there are people who want tactical miniatures on a map and play around, and they're going to map out, I'm going to cast Fireball and put it here so that the circle goes here, right? There's that. And then there's people who go, I cast Fireball, can I hit everyone, all the villains without my friends? No, it's very thematic. So there's a spectrum of tactical versus thematic in RPGs, and I think 4.0 went a little too far to the tactical. So you lost the themers. You have to be able to have a game system that allows you to go either way with it.
It said that you could play with theater of the mind.
Yeah.
Right? But every spell, every action, everything had to do with the square grid. Period.
It sure did.
Everything was built around the square grid.
Yep. I mean, they had a plan for a VTT. Unfortunately, there was some tragedy with that, which I'm not going to get into. You can look it up. And so they were bit on the ankle from that. The terrible marketing.
It was a great system. It had its place. If it wasn't for fourth edition, Paizo would not be where it's at. Period.
Right. That's true.
Paizo would not be the company that is if fourth edition hadn't come around.
That's a fantastic way to transition
segue
into
state of the RPG.
Yeah. So let me explain a little bit what Carlos is talking about. So back when fourth edition was coming around, they made an announcement, and prior to that, with third edition, there was this thing called the OGL, this open license, where you could use the license to basically make stuff that was derivative of Dungeons and Dragons. They had what's called a system reference document. It had like most of the rules in it, except for the product identity. So you couldn't use like Strahd, who's a famous vampire in a setting, but you could use the stats for a vampire. But also, the OGL was used by other companies because they liked the simplicity of the license. Games that had nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons, and so the industry really grew up around it. Well, anyway, fourth edition comes along. Wizards of the Coast decides they're not going to have that license for fourth edition.
Yeah.
It could be closed.
That killed it.
And Paizo, who was making modules for 3.5, said, "Nah, dude, we'll go ahead and make our own game based on with the OGL," and that's where Pathfinder came from, the second most popular game in the market. It was arguably the most popular game in the market for a while.
It was, yeah.
During the fourth edition days. But
and clearly WotC, Wizard of the Coast, Hasbro, whatever, they did not learn their lesson at all. In fact, they doubled down on stupidity. But yeah.
Yes. So state of RPGs. So fifth edition has been around since 2014. The most popular edition of D&D by leaps and bounds, by every numerical measurement. Like we have the numbers to back it. So they don't really want to mess with that. So they're like, okay, we'll just tweak our next edition, the 50th anniversary edition. It's going to be a slight tweaking, but it should be fully backwards compatible with fifth edition. Well, they tried to do this thing again where they closed the license. But by this time, the industry that like relied on the license, whether it's a D&D type game or not, has grown, I would say, like tenfold. Paizo uses it, and a whole bunch of other folks have used it, and they try to basically revoke this license that's supposed to be irrevocable.
No, I think it literally said in the license, like for perpetuity, like you can have this forever. I promise.
Yeah, but there was something they were trying to do in one little clause of the license that it wasn't really meant to be, but it was clearly some bean counters idea, because it seems like the folks that actually designed the game, other folks.
Yeah, it absolutely was. So I just want to interject a little point there. So there was, so Hasbro is a publicly traded company, and they had a shareholders meeting, and the new CEO or the new head of Hasbro WotC, who came from Amazon and Microsoft and all these other things, they literally said to like shareholders, like, hey, like all the profit from Hasbro came from Wizards of the Coast, and all the profit from Wizards of the Coast is from two sources: Magic the Gathering and D&D. And they literally talked about how, and then there was a bunch of like hedge fund people came out and said that D&D is under monetized. And the moment in finance when hedge fund people and stock people and they go, this is under monetized, that they're going to find a way to, like, that's immediately telling people that shareholders, like, hey, this company has a product that could be making more money and they're not. And how they're going to, and that, like, within 6 months of that shareholder meeting is when all this crap happened with the Wizards of the Coast and trying to change everything. So, yeah. And
let me say, like, if Wizards of the Coast would have been successful at this time, they would have crashed the entire industry.
Yeah.
Whether it was intentional or not, because there are so many products out there with this license. And I want to reiterate, the games that have absolutely nothing to do with D&D and those mechanics, they just use the license because it was a nice, simple license to use.
No, like I've played adventures and I've owned, and I still hear somewhere, the war in Afghanistan, based on that OGL license. Like it being able to play as either side of the war of Afghanistan using that OGL license. Think about all the different ideas that have stemmed from that OGL, that open gaming license, for settings, you know, companion books, or just supplements to D&D based off of that OGL. If it went away, that's a huge. I mean, state of the RPG. You can't have that conversation without talking about drive-through RPG. Period. Drive-through
Right,
RPG,
yeah.
online source for PDFs of RPG content, books, adventures, etc. That whole website would be gone. Most of that stuff.
Or it would be owned by Wizards of the Coast.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was, and that's the thing is, state of the industry. So it's never been better, right? It like
Right.
the money making, and it's really just kind of everything nerd based, right? So with Disney and Marvel and Star Wars and like even DC and just video games and computer games and RPGs and board games, like we're in a Pax Romana of nerddom, right? It's never been a better.
I'm sorry, that was a 25-cent word, and I do not have change for $1 right now.
Pax Romana is like the height of the Roman Empire, right? We're at the height of the Roman Empire for being a nerd, is what Pax Romana means, right? Sorry, yes, it's a 25-cent word.
English was not my first language.
Pax Romana, the height of the Roman Empire. We're at the height of the Roman Empire for being a nerd, right? It's never been a better time to be a nerd, because look at all the movies and the billion, like for the last 10 years. And it's and just everyone's getting into things, and you have Critical Role making $20 million a quarter off of Twitch, and all.
And I remember when the Inquisition Incorporated, the
Acquisition
Incorporated. When those guys were doing it, there weren't many. There were not many out there. It was like one of the few that I was able to watch. But now, you're right. There's so many options of game groups to watch on YouTube or other content creators playing RPGs.
Right, and it's like something very close to Ron and I, Dragon Con, right? 23 years ago, 2000, Dragon Con was like 15,000, 20,000 people, right? It was mostly like a lot of white dudes who were into gaming and into nerd stuff. Now you go there and it's just everything you can think of in the spectrum of being a nerd. But point being is like this is literally the best time to be into the role-playing game or any kind of nerd culture. And D&D almost destroyed it in the last 6 months. Like they literally almost like pulled a grenade, threw it, and was like, let's just blow it up, because it's like, and that's what's crazy. And I think, and Ron, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I think we're not even yet seeing the damage that they've done to themselves, not the industry. I think RPGs and gaming is going to continue to grow, and I think it's going to become even crazier because all these big companies are banding together to do their own thing, and we're seeing Matt Colville and his group doing their own RPG. And I honestly think Critical Role, which is really the 5,000-pound gorilla, this recent campaign that Matt Mercer's doing with Critical Role, he's clearly getting ready to kill off all the gods in his world of Alexandria, and all of the gods in Alexandria are D&D gods. So he's getting ready to kill them all off and create his own pantheon of gods, which was the last thing that was like owned by Wizards of the Coast. And we saw the Amazon show that they've done. They stripped out everything in the Amazon show that could be copyrightable by Wizards, so that everything in the TV show on Amazon, the cartoon on Amazon, is theirs. And so I think what you're going to see in the next year or two is all of these big systems that are independent of D&D, and Wizards of the Coast is going to go, but they're going to be losing out on a lot of revenue from third-party stuff, and people are going to be playing other game systems again. That's going to be interesting. Anyway, so Ron, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
So right now, I'll just kind of wrap up the whole thing with the OGL mess.
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast backtrack. As a matter of fact, they put their 5th edition system reference document into the Creative Commons, which is fantastic. And they stated that they will not revoke the OGL. Now, I still think they have plans to do that, but the damage has already been done, because they're Critical Role, they have a company called Darrington Press. I suspect they're going to make their own game.
Yep.
You have like MCDM,
Matt Covell,
Matt Covell, who they were making 5th edition products, and now all this did was push forward their plans to make their own heroic fantasy RPG. We have companies like Paizo has helped spearheaded a new like open license that's going to be irrevocable. That's going to, I guess, they're going to register with the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
Like
that's crazy, right?
Yeah. So, and all that stuff is great. People scrubbed, OGL references out of their products and are either going to Creative Commons or going to be signing on with one of a number of other licenses being developed right now. So in a way, this OGL situation, actually Watchie's greed actually has spurred, I think, a new phase of growth. By the way, like Pathfinder sold out 8 months of stock in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I just read before we started that Evil Hat, the company that makes the Fate RPG and Monster of the Week, they've had their best quarter in their 15-year history. I wonder why that is.
Yeah. So I think I'm with you, Ron. I'm positive. I'm Mr. Positivity. I think this is going to spur another jump in growth in the RPG, kind of like when White Wolf and Vampire and all those came out to compete against kind of D&D back in the day, where you had more people. You have different systems that fit different play styles and different personalities. That's going to draw more people into gaming. Whereas instead of everyone playing D&D, now you've got all these crazy systems that people can play. So I want to stay positive, and I think that's what's going to happen. You could also say, because there's 50 million different systems, no one's going to know how to get into gaming.
That's the trouble. Like, that's where I struggle.
But I think the difference between now and 20 years ago is you have Critical Role, where if Critical Role creates its own game system, 50,000 people a night watch them on Twitch, and they get millions of views. So if you want to learn a new game system, watch Critical Role. If you want to learn an MCDM system, watch Matt Covell on Twitch. So I think the vast communication nature that we have now with social media is going to crazy.
Yeah. So I guess we're going into our third topic, right? Like talking about getting into RPGs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because when there are, and this is and maybe there are many other people like me, when there are too many options, I freeze and choose none of them. Right? Like, I don't know what the right answer is, so I freeze, and you know what? I'll just go back to my board games for a little while. So how does someone get into today's modern day of gaming, of role play gaming, when they're stepping out of their comfort zone, out of maybe a board game world or even a video gaming world in today's modern age?
Good question. First of all, I'm going to state this very clearly. Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is fine.
Yeah.
If that is what's going to get you into the hobby, then be my guest. I have issues with the company, apparently not so much that I refuse to see the movie that came out, but the game itself, issues aside, even mechanical issues aside, is fine to get into. However, this is 2023. We have this thing called the internet. There are more RPGs out there than just Dungeons and Dragons or even the fantasy genre. You could do a Google search or a YouTube search. You want to play something in the Wild West, you can look for a Wild West RPG. You want to play sci-fi or you want to play Star Wars? Right, Deadlands.
So Wild West.
Right. See, I had no idea Deadlands had an RPG. I only knew it because of its miniature war game.
So Wild
Deadlands
West
had a miniature war game.
Sci-fi.
I love this.
Start
we
gaming.
gotta at the end of the show, we gotta go through our favorite like books, kind of show them off. But Ron, on this topic here, Diego's got a question, so let's kind of bring it back even
his
more
question's
basic.
a great one because that works
Yes.
into this. Yeah.
So, from someone who's not played an RPG, what are the differences between a board game and an RPG? How structured is it compared to a board game? Who wants to take that? It is.
Board game has a structure. It always has a structure. You have rules. You have to follow those rules. If you do not follow those rules, you will break the game, and the game will not work as intended. A role-playing game, it may have a few rules. It can have a robust series of rules, like to a board game, but the main difference is you don't have these guardrails. Like you can go off the road and do all kinds of wild stuff.
You can improvise.
You can improvise, exactly. It is a storytelling medium. Now, I personally believe that role-playing games are not storytelling games. The stories come as a result of the play. The play creates the story. But yeah, there's improv and I'm not talking about talking in the voice or accents or what have you. All that stuff is great. But the thing is that, like, if you put yourself in the mind of a character and make decisions based on what that character would do, and they make different decisions than you, Diego, would make, that's role playing.
Right. And I like to really emphasize this difference because I am the different one usually at my table. I come in to role play. ROLL play.
Oh, roll.
No. Wayne comes to role play. ROLE.
Yes.
I am the LL. So when the DM Ron says to Carlos, well, you got the king in front of you. You get an opportunity to explain your situation to try to get the desired outcome. I say, well, my charisma says my modifier is this. I'm going to chuck my die. Okay, I got an 18.
Yeah,
how far did that get me?
Yeah.
Right? That's my role play.
I will sit there and do that, like, conversation. Yeah.
A role player, ROLE,
valid, yeah.
will have that conversation and talk to the king in voice or other to try to get what they need.
Yeah.
Now, we got a caller coming in. Beads and Dice Podcast. State your name, where you're calling from.
William with Nerdy Weds from Port Richey.
Hey, you made it. Thank you for calling in.
I did.
We are on an RPG trip tonight. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I saw. I've been playing RPGs since I was 13 years old.
It's kind of very similar to our stories that we shared earlier in the show.
Yeah, I missed earlier in the show. I was working on thumbnails for YouTube channel.
I was doing that this morning.
No, I like what some of the things you're saying. Going with the idea of role-playing games versus board games. One of the things I'd like to add to that is you can, just like you were talking about ROLL playing, you can break a board game down to the most fundamental, moving a miniature according to the rules, basically like a board game. You can break it down to that level. But what makes a role-playing game special is being able to go off the beaten path. You're not following a track on a board. You're not even following what the GM intended you to do. You can do
Scooby-Dooing
a large amount of whatever you want, really.
Yeah, that's what makes it fantastic.
That's what makes it fantastic. I love it. And I'll just comment. I've been watching the your videos. I love you guys' show and the videos you're putting out. And you guys are right here in Tampa as well. So, there's got to be a time where you guys come out to the game. We got game days coming up at your turn, and I know. Zeno has been bugging me. Had been bugging me for a long time about it, but with my work schedule, I just changed jobs, so hopefully I have a little more time. Cool.
Until that really gets rolling.
And
looking forward to meeting up with you guys again.
Yep. And Ron, the Nerdy Weds are Dragon Con people as well, so they will be with me in Atlanta during Dragon Con as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
Our buddy
every year
Ron is
since
from
2010.
from Atlanta as well.
yeah. Ron's from
He's
Atlanta.
from Hotlanta.
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Actually, it's kind of cold
Yeah.
Atlanta this year.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so my quick comment on board game versus RPG is, and I kind of like, I'll pick a board game and do an example. So Dune Imperium, right? You can play Dune Imperium, the board game, and you have cards that are Paul Atreides or the various cards, and you play it and you read the text and you do the text, you move your worker, right? That's a board game. An RPG would be like, I'm Duke Leto Atreides and I'm playing my I'm going to order my, Gurney Halleck to do this. And I'm going to, you get it. It's really sort of the theme of the game. It's taking a board game and taking theme and playing it up and doing more of the discussion and what's the motivation behind the card that you're playing. And that's your abilities. That's your ability score. That's your die roll of, you're sending the Gurney Halleck to go take out the Sardaukar and having that conversation with the Baron, right? That's the difference between a board game and an RPG. It's similar. Any board game has a brass Birmingham, right? I'm in a coal industrial baron in England, doing things. Well,
I think I got a picture of me dressed up in like a 1800s
thing, right?
style hoodie.
You could just play the card and say, I build a cotton mill in Manchester, or you can, role playing is taking it a step further and talking you through and arguing about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I think the main differentiation between board game and your regular game or your role playing game. I had it just a second ago, and I lost track listening to you.
All right.
It's all right.
I have that effect on people.
Yeah. Another big. No, this is what it was. The rules. The rules in a board game are solid. They are inviolate. You cannot violate the rules of a board game and have it function.
Right.
Whereas the number one rule in every role-playing game, you find it in every DM guide, GM section, at the beginning of every RPG book. These rules are a guide. They're not there for, an iron fist. Just because the rule says you can't do something. The GM can be like, rule of cool, that was awesome, go for it. Or, you're talking about your charisma score thing says that you should be able to do something. Yeah, that's true, but if it violates the narrative in such a way that ruins the story, the GM might, make it an impossible role for you to make. For instance, that's why they have a GM screen or a DM screen,
right?
So the player can't see what roles they're supposed to make. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now I know you, as in us, Ron, myself, and Wayne, William, you're also a board gamer in that space too.
Oh, big time, yeah.
So for like a Diego of the world who's asking about first time playing RPGs, how would you bridge the gap for them? Right? What games would you recommend that get them out of the mechanism focus of a board game that is still maybe a board game and closer towards the narrative storytelling? What game would you recommend?
It's still a board game, still fits in that solid rule set. Gloomhaven springs to mind. It is got a lot of the same elements. You've got a character. It's going through a narrative. There are even choices that you make to change that narrative. There are many different paths you can take to victory or defeat, just like a role-playing game. And it's a little bit closer to role-playing games than, something like Viticulture or another thematic board game.
Good call. Good answer.
Yeah, I think
Gloomhaven
is probably the best
like
example
2
right now. Yeah. I think also you could throw out there like Stuffed Fables or Mice and Mystics, those kind of games where there's
Conan.
You have like a series of adventures that you're going through and you're working up to, and then while you're doing that, you have to try to add in your narrative, right? Don't just play Gloomhaven and like Rob and just play the card and that's it. Talk about like, I'm going to do this ability.
Read the flavor text.
Yeah.
Right. Descent. Yep. Descent. Imperial Assault. Getting off of fantasy, going into a different genre. Yeah.
And one of Wayne's favorite. Wayne, name yours. I'm going to guess it here. If you don't get it right, one of your favorite kind of board gamey, themey Mansions of Madness.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Mansions of Madness. I mean, that to me felt like an RPG
character.
more than it felt like a board game.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
the Dungeon Master was the computer, William. It was a computer. It was the app.
Yeah.
But I really loved that Mansions of Madness as an RPG style game.
Mansions of Madness, Fury of Dracula. Like
Another-
anytime you're given a character, don't just play the rules. Try to talk it up, right? Be in character, right?
Another great game that kind of follows along, but in the opposite way, is a game called Gloom. There are games out there where the players are creating a narrative
The card
with
game.
cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a card game. You're trying to tell a story about how awful your family is as you're trying to kill them off, and your opponent's adding good things to them to try to prevent you from scoring a bunch of points. And it's a kind of a narrative creating board game, card game thing. This is a cool way to do like a role play experience light.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it's also the Stormlight Archives has a version of it. Call to Adventure is another great game that kind
yes.
of bridges the gap a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
Light on mechanisms, heavy on story or creating of story. Those are all ways for someone like a Diego to begin to bridge the gap to the full RPG. Now, here's the segment we're on that you called us in, William. The segment you called us in is in the part of how do we get someone to RPG, starting in RPG world. What would you recommend they do to get into RPG, either a game or a thing that you think they should do to be getting into RPGs?
Well, there are two ways to approach it. You can either find an established group or location that's hosting games. Getting into like Dungeons and Dragons, they have the one-shot adventures. They run it like Dungeons and at Dragon Con and other conventions. I'm trying to remember the series of games, what they're called, but there's an actual
Adventures League.
Adventures League.
Adventures League, yes. Getting involved in Adventures League is a good way to get introduced as long as it is a noob table. Don't
Yes.
let them stick you at a table with a bunch of experienced players. You'll get dominated. Another way is finding, like I said, places that are hosting games, that people have established games. Getting in with experienced players who are there to help you, and they're not paying to play the same game as you are, but they're there to help you, is a great way to get introduced. If you're really wanting to find a game, find a world that you're comfortable in. I know you guys mentioned like Wild West and Star Wars and all that stuff. Find a world that excites you thematically, with the type of characters you want to play. One of my first role-playing games I ever played, other than Dungeons and Dragons, was Robotech from Palladium Games, in Riffs and Cyberpunk and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A massive amount of role-playing games.
Yeah, and that's a good point, William, with the Robotech. The idea that, you know what, find a video, a film, or animated series that you already enjoy, because that can help you understand the world without having to read fluff. Like, you already know Avatar: The World if you watch the whole series. So getting into the game, you kind of secret tunnel. You already know all that fun stuff. You can have those inside jokes with the other players without having to catch up on the world.
That's true.
I know, Ron, you're not a big fan of the new D&D movie.
No. I'm a fan of the movie.
Okay, good. Because I was about to say that is
awesome.
one of the best things to happen since my childhood with Dungeons and Dragons. It finally, I have something I can show people to give them an idea of what Dungeons and Dragons is supposed to be. Is it perfect? No. But it is a great jumping off point to introducing people to Dungeons and Dragons.
There really is. Yep.
Yep.
And I think that's a good point too. Just the find something you like, right? Like, so I've showed Stargate, right? So hey, you were a fan of the Stargate? There's an RPG, right? That you were a fan of. You were a fan of Star Wars. There's an RPG. You were a fan of Avatar. There's an RPG. So, if you have,
I've got Alien.
Yep.
I got that one.
Expanse.
I've got Dresden Files RPG. All Flesh with Speed, which is zombie based, and you got.
You know what? Maybe we'll do that. We talked about this as kind of like a one shot show, this RPG show. But as we've done it more, I'm thinking I do a like a once a month Blood Bowl like this Friday night call-in show. We got to do this one again next month.
Yeah.
And we can go through our library of books and kind of point out all the different books. That could be our whole show. That could be a whole hour. Just going through all the different books of the games.
It sure
that we
can.
love.
Yep. And it's
Now-
going back to Diego's question, I think the big thing for Diego is like, he's a board gamer already, right? And he plays board games with a million of us, right? If you want to try an RPG, there's enough of us around where we could set up a one shot of a game.
Oh, on a game day too, like on a Saturday, you can
I
definitely.
could bring what's your favorite system or what's your favorite genre? I'll come with pre-generated characters, 3 or 4 of them, and it's a 3-hour or 2-hour, quick mission. I'll give you the background story, and we'll go. And then,
Man, I want to drive down to Tampa to do that.
there you go. Come on down. It's only a 4 or 5 hour drive, right?
I'm sure we can get the beans and dicers to throw in my beaners, as I call them, to throw in some cash app to pay for your gas. We can figure that out.
Although I'll say this, Ron, do you come to Dice Tower East this year?
Yes, I am.
Oh, we got to do something.
could
We're
do
all
it.
going to
We
be
could
there
do a
together.
day where we do
William,
like a
are you at
3
Dice
hour-
Tower East this year?
Oh, we are certainly planning on being at Dice Tower. I believe we got it set up.
D&D session.
All right, so
a
here's
game
my
session of
thoughts.
some kind.
Just kind of throwing it out, spitballing right here. I'm going to throw out there, play with it, bring it back to me. William, next time we do this next month, we bring you in as a guest host as well, because you're Tampa, and I love promoting Tampa. And then we find a way to get together. We enjoy that, and then we figure out about July Dice Tower getting together for a game, all of us.
Yeah.
So how's that sound? Joining us for a May episode of Beans and Dice RPG on a Friday night.
That sounds great. I'd love to.
All right, I'll start a group chat for us 4, and we'll pick a day. We really appreciate you calling in, William.
Yeah.
Hey,
Folks,
thanks for having me.
great talking
Have a
to
good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Yep.
See you. Folks, this is how Carlos do things.
Yeah, he does.
He likes to do that. It's like,
Great, because so I called Ron. I don't know who called in the first show first, Ron or I, whatever. But Ron and I originally ended up as callers to the Beans and Dice podcast, and then we ended up on the podcast.
And then you're at my house eating food and drinking with
Yeah.
me. That's how it rolls.
Hanging out. Yeah.
Got some comments in the chat here. Marissa says, "Hey, Ron." So I guess we got someone that knows Ron.
oh, Marissa. Yeah.
Mad props. Ron getting some viewers for us. We've got Ben Reynolds with a wavy hand. Hello, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you for popping in.
Thanks for popping in,
Diego
guys.
says, I do know the last Airbender world.
There you go.
There's your one shot.
There's one shot. Right.
There's a one shot we could do with Diego.
Yeah.
Wayne, you'd have to run that because
I can run it. I'll run it. Yeah, I can easily run a quick one shot. But I think that's what it is. Is like, Diego, you've played a lot of board games. And I think that's, so if you take it from how do you get into RPGing, right? So there's people who already know kind of tangentially the world of it. So if you play a Gloomhaven or Joe's a Lion or Mansions of Madness, it's not it's a pretty quick jump to playing a role-playing game. And I think where Carlos, you talked before, there's ROLL players and then there's ROLE players. And I think if you're coming from the board game world, you're going to start off as a role player, ROLL. You're going to go, okay, I want to convince the king to let me go on this quest. So I'm going to roll my D20 and add my charisma. And that's perfectly fine. I love it. You could do that for the rest of your life and never change.
But
Great.
you know what was, and just pause real quick. The DM, when I did that at the time, what was great was he came up with the words. Now, listen, I grew up Section 8 housing in Suitcase City of Tampa, Florida. Yep. Okay, Hialeah was right before that, so it was one of the worst parts of Miami. I did not have the words to be able to describe William Shakespeare like what to say to the king, but he did it for me. He said, "You rolled a this, and it sounded like this," and I'm like, "Okay, cool." Now, what did that get us? So if you're a good DM, ROLL playing can work. Now, talk about the role play.
There's a whole spectrum, right? And I've had game groups that had hardcore role players and hardcore role players. And you can have that in a game group. And it's totally cool because, me, my wife and I, we might be doing voices and getting into character, and I might be in character. And you will not mess up my time or hurt my time or whatever if you are going, I can't do that, so I'm going to roll my charisma and da-da-da-da. Fine. that's cool by me, because that's how you're enjoying the game, and that moves the story along anyway, because the GM and the group of us, we will move the story along and go with it. So yeah, that's totally cool.
And don't be nervous about it. Don't feel ashamed. Don't feel shy about it. Just be your natural you.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right. Carlos, so we're talking about all this, like all of this discussion started because you mentioned that you and your son saw the D&D movie, enjoyed it, and your son wants to get into D&D and everything like that. And so you got him signed up to do some Adventurers League stuff, which is cool.
Yeah, that was
and you're gonna run some stuff.
That was gonna be my answer to how to get into D&D. Was the Adventurers League, because I ran what used to be called Encounters back in 4th edition, which is now Adventurers League set in the Forgotten Realm setting that William brought up. So William stole my thunder on that one. Thank you, though. I appreciate you calling in, because you knew the assignment. It's a call-in show. You understood the assignment. But my son did sign up, played his first game, and he's had one combat, rolled maybe one combat die the whole time, but still had a great time. And I said, well, how'd y'all get through your adventure? He goes, oh, we just kind of figured out ways to trick our way through.
That's what's up.
And it reminded me, like, D&D is more than just a combat role.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So
we were scheduled for May 2nd. We had a group of us take up a whole table. Armada Games in Temple Terrace, Florida, the purveyors of awesome gaming, from wargaming all the way down to RPG stuff. Have us booked in, but my son now has a concert for his trumpet on that same night, so we're gonna have to find another night. I know. Thing is that I booked every Tuesday in the month of May for him and I to play, but May 2nd I booked him, myself, my best man and best friend Mike Wilson, his son and his stepdaughter, all of us to take up a whole table for May 2nd. And now I got to figure out how to fit us into another night, and they book up so fast at Armada when it comes to D&D. They book up so quick.
Because it's very popular.
Akina says, William, welcome to my world. William always steals my thunder, too.
But we love it. It was great. I thank you so much for calling in, because that was fantastic.
Yeah, it was.
Adventures League at Armada Games costs $5, I think, to sign up. They host 6 players per table. There's one DM, and like William said, find the newbie table. There's always a tier 1, table for 1st to 3rd level characters, which is newbie friendly. The DM at that table is always prepared to teach.
Yeah, even in Adventure League, they even go even further than that. They actually have specific intro modules where it's designed for 1st level players. Typically, it's the 2 hours, and sometimes there's even the 1 hour delves that they like to run, and it gives you a little bit of taste, and like it's a small commitment. You get those at game days and conventions mainly, but stores can run it too, and then you can just figure it out if it's something that you like. I was always going to say, D&D is not the only company that has
That's
organized
like the 5th
play.
time you said that in the last hour.
You know what? I sure did, because here's the thing, like. It's D&D is fine, but the thing is that, like, that's all a lot of people are going to know, and I just want people to know that there's more out there. Like Pathfinder has their Pathfinder Society, for example.
All right, so we'll wrap it up. Anyway, we had a good conversation about how to get in. We talked about our history. We established our street cred when it came to RPGs, and then we took you all into the state of the RPG world.
You ready to kick me off?
We ended it up with kind of how to get into RPGs. Let's get that prize out of the Cracker Jack box, in the bottom of the Cracker Jack box, that thing that we really enjoy. Let's each go around the horn and give out and talk about maybe our favorite non-D&D game that, kind of fill in the gaps from when we started playing to where we are now, but the one that kind of like made us, brings back memories.
I got it. Okay.
And I'll start it off if I need to.
Yeah. No, you can if you want. Yeah, go for it.
All right. For me,
but you want to finish because it's your show.
Oh, okay. I'll finish.
I already know my answer.
I just pay for the hosting. Y'all are the show.
Wayne. Okay, sounds like Wayne needs to think.
No,
but
go ahead.
Okay, so I'm a fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. and there is a fantastic game out there, produced by Free League Publishing, called The One Ring RPG. And I love the game so much.
I love your shirt, man. Carpe Diem.
Thank you.
I almost wore my
Diem.
Rules Layer shirt, but
Not only do I have the standard hardcover. I want to hold that up there for a few seconds so people can really appreciate that. I
Look at
also
that matte black with the gloss.
yeah, that's cool.
it's fantastic.
This will be fun. Next episode, we go through our whole library, just
Yeah.
pulling off books
I'd
off
be
our
here for
shelves and
hours.
talking about them.
I also have
Oh, that's cool.
the special edition hardcover.
I like it.
That's like a prop out of a movie.
Love it.
I know.
That looks cool.
Yeah. It's a fantastic game.
And that's the Lord of the Rings setting.
Yes. It's this is the One Ring role playing game.
And this is where we'll talk about it on the next episode.
Yeah.
As you know, I have trouble with established IPs because I feel like I'm inserting myself into an established world that already has canon and a start and an end. And like, where do I fit in? How do I find a story? But we'll talk about that on the next
that's a good one.
episode.
That's a good topic.
I'll just say this. I got 3 words for you. Find the gaps.
Yep. Or change the history.
Well, kind of like
Or
the board game Journeys in Middle Earth did. It highlighted some non-movie characters and their adventures in Middle Earth.
Right.
Nerdy Weds Williams says Earth Dawn by FASA Games is my one of my all-time favorites, he says.
FASA Games is an old school. That's an old game. Yeah, they had a lot of good stuff. I say, you know what? I have to go with. All right, I'm going to go with. Yeah.
Seventh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
So this is the game that broke me from ROLL playing. This is Three Musketeers, Count of Monte Cristo, Pirates of the Caribbean. It's basically
Swashbuckling sword fighting.
Swashbuckling sword fighting adventures. Highly thematic, and it's exploding dice, and it's what it is. It's kind of like a different world's version of Europe, and it takes kind of all the countries of Europe and takes interesting times from those countries and melds them all into one continent. So you have France is during like the French Revolution, is Russia is during like the Tsars, and England is during like the periods of the high seas, and Germany is during like the Reformation, and it's like this. So it's like this alternative history of all the countries of Europe, and it's just highly thematic. And this is the game that my wife loves to play, and she loves to GM it. And when we first met, I was a D&D player, and she was the White Wolf player. And she's like, well, let's play this game 7C. And man, when I tell stories of a D&D event or my role-playing games, there's so many stories that I tell of the game nights we had playing 7C, just highly thematic. I want to fly across the chandelier and cut my knife down the drapery and save the damsel and fight the guards, and it's just super cool. And so 7C is my favorite game.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. That's the first edition of the game.
Yes, it is. I don't do second edition.
This is the second. This is the second edition of the game.
Yep.
Yep. My boy,
Of course,
he's got a flex. He's got a flex.
They're all over here, right? I got them too.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, he has them too. We had this conversation.
Everything. But no, they're good, and it's really cool. It's a great game system. It's just fun, and that it's just you just say I want to try this, and you just chuck a bunch of dice, and a couple of them will explode or not explode, and it's just very thematic. It's cool. That's what 7C is probably my favorite game system of all time.
I love this. I love that setting. It's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, for me, the one that really kind of solidified my love for RPG outside of Dungeons and Dragons, outside of the fantasy kind of world, has to be. It is still a WotC product.
Oh,
it is.
Yep.
D20 Modern.
It's good.
I love that.
It's good. It's based off of the 3.5 system,
Yep.
3rd edition. kind of halfway through third edition, they did some minor tweaks to the system, but it's set in a modern world, and it really just kind of blew my mind. It kind of has that Dresden Files feel to it. Go watch Netflix's Bright. I would say Bright with Will Smith.
Absolutely. Yep.
That is like D20 Modern.
You mean that?
Oh, Dresden Files. There it is. D20 Modern is, imagine if fantasy was going on in today's world.
That's great.
But most people just didn't know it, right? The creepy looking short guy at the counter selling the McDonald's hamburgers is really a hobgoblin, but there's just kind of this magical shadowing that just makes him look like a short, Mexican guy, right? Like you can't tell he's really just a hobgoblin, and next thing you know, he's getting into a fight. All of a sudden the lights kind of flash and boom, the curtain is thrown off you. Yep. You can see these are lizard men fighting each other, and you can see bugbears sitting over in the corner eating some burgers, right? Like part of the people that live here have somehow come through a rift into today's world from the D&D fantasy world. And what do you do with that knowledge, right? Next thing you know, you're finding out that the drug pin that runs the streets in your neighborhood isn't really a human.
He's an orc.
It's an orc.
Yeah.
It's so freaking cool.
You know what I loved also about D20 Modern was you don't start as a fighter, mage, or ranger. You don't start as a class. You start as a swift hero or a strong hero or a dexterous hero. You're just your normal self that happens. But like you kind of point yourself in a direction of I want to be really smart or fast, and allow you do a levels of that before you specialize later on. That's pretty cool. I love that.
Okay.
The adventures I've had in this game system I'm talking about as an adult. The adventures, so not as a kid, not as an adolescent, not as a teen, but as a grown up, running and playing these adventures told me that I am an RPGer rest of my life.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game. I can't help but say there's a company that hired the principal designers of D20 Modern, and they have a D20 Modern for 5th edition called Everyday Heroes.
I'm sorry, what? Say what? Say it in Spanish, please.
Everyday Heroes. Go look it up.
Yeah.
It's great, and they're also doing like these different cinematic adventures, these 100-page books, whether that's setting an adventure like Pacific Rim. I bought that PDF Pacific Rim, The Crow, Escape from LA or New York or something like that.
Very cool.
So anyway.
And I've ran adventures in D20 Modern without the fantasy aspect because the rule set in there includes firearms, modern weapons, modern armor. I was playing video games on, it was PlayStation 1. That was a while ago. Like Tom Clancy stuff, right? That I was just converting into maps and adventures using the D20 rule set without all the fantasy.
Yeah.
So kind of the shoot 'em up fun style of it. It's so open.
Yeah.
So those
D20 Modern was great because you could do fantasy, you could do non-fantasy, you could do a million different things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the back of the book, and the price of the book was $39.95 US. And then I look at the D&D Player's Handbook, and it's $49.95. And I'm like, you know what? For 20 years later, it's only gone up $10. That's not a terrible investment to get into a game system.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
All right, we'll go through our library shelves. I got others that I want to talk about, other settings outside of D&D that I really enjoyed, and I'd love to hear more about the books you have in your library of some of those games that you enjoy that you'd recommend to others, and those settings and the reasons those rules are special. Well, that'll wrap us up for today's show, for our special edition of the Beans and Dice Call-In Show. We did get a call-in, so it still makes it a call-in show.
They did. It's awesome.
And this one is all about RPGs. So next time we will work together to try to get us in May.
Yeah.
Sometime in the month of May, try to get another RPG-focused conversation with me, Carlos, and my guest host tonight.
I guess that's me, Ron.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm not a guest host. I'm just a schmuck that lives near him.
Ron, tell the folks at home where they can find you.
Yeah.
Well, you can see it on the screen. I am on Instagram at Ron Talks Tabletop, at YouTube at Ron Frazier, where I actually talk mainly RPGs, so my audience is smaller there, and Facebook at Ron Talks Tabletop.
And my buddy Wayne, thank you for joining me again to
Appreciate
be
it.
here with me. And looks like we, we'll need to plan for the next
I think so.
game day that
Nick,
you're able to come to.
How do we keep up with all these systems? We'll answer
Oh,
that
yeah, Nick
next
Oben's
month.
asking,
You
how do we
watch-
keep up with all these systems?
Yeah.
Let's see. William has the right answer.
Yeah.
Mostly by dumping most of our formal education.
Yeah.
My mom always said to me, Carlito, if you read as much textbooks as you read these books, you'd be a doctor. And I'm like, Mommy, you're probably right. You're probably right.
Yeah.
So here I am, a disappointment to my Puerto Rican mother.
Yeah. It's hard to keep up with all the systems. I think it's, but you just got to keep trying. And it's 35 plus years of role playing, you do a lot of that stuff.
How do you keep up with all those board games?
So,
I know.
Now, some of the rule books are thin, but some
yeah.
of them are, but anyway. I have very strong opinions about role playing.
we could talk. I think that's as far as all the systems we play and how we keep up with them and stuff like that. That's very good for next month, I think.
And I'll count
Nick,
on
we all
Wayne to keep a thread. He does a good job on that. Yeah, we all got good mugs. Plus one.
Plus one.
Was it plus one gaming?
Yep.
Plus one
Yeah,
gaming.
that's actually a game store in New Orleans, where I'm originally from.
Ooh, that's nice. Cool.
All right, folks, we thank you all for joining us. We will catch y'all Thursday nights, every Thursday night, where we take your phone calls. Call in if you happen to watch this episode and you are available Thursday night. Call in and tell us what you thought. Talk to us about this episode. If
we
you
could
think
talk
should do more
RPGs
of it.
on the Thursday night show. That Rob would love it.
I sent Rob the invite for tonight, and notice he never showed up. All right, yeah.
Okay.
Appreciate you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Beans and Dice podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Please like, subscribe, tell your friends about what we're doing here. We're just having fun. Bye, everybody.